those programs to a level that we're not used to. If you choose independence, it does have very, 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 very good control of what you're going to do in the future. But the downside of it is for the next 10 to 20 years, it's going to be at the sacrifice of the people that move towards that independence. You're probably going to be earning $3 an hour, which is the wage that you're going to see in South Korea, that you're going to see in the Philippines, that you're going to see in Thailand and Tahiti. You can try to say you can be Singapore, maybe get to $8 an hour. Maybe, I don't know if we have the same resources, but it needs to be done with a long-term plan of how to bring an economy that will get us to where we need to be, and realize that it's going to be on the back of our young generation that's going to take the real hard labor of getting us there. And it's going to be a huge sacrifice, and we should be rewarded for that in the future. But for the short term, it's not a cakewalk up. We're staying at $9 an hour, and everything's going to look the same, and everybody's going to want to continue to invest in it.
Thank you. I think we would be able to agree on something. It is going to be a long, difficult process. There would be, really, regardless of the status chosen, there would be disruptions to the local economy and to business and the operations of business and the availability of labor, so I'm pressing on that point. And that's why I advocate looking more closely at the processes involved and not just the kind of the emotional end state preference. Now, you're an advocate of statehood. I'm not. Nor do I advocate free association, nor do I advocate independence. It's not my decision to make. It's one of the few advantages of being a Hyatt in Guam. It's not my responsibility.
That's your easy out, right?
Works for me. No, there's some of us from outside the island who feel entitled to involvement in this decision. I am not one of those. I vote in every election, I vote in every primary election, I want to be involved in other decisions, but political status is not a decision that is mine to make.
Thanks, Joe.
So,
with regards to choosing between all of the options, again, I don't think it should hinder our opportunities. I think even with where we are today, we are all given the same place to start from, as far as continuing to enhance what we currently have, whether it's tax incentives. We certainly have PETA that offers different kinds of tax programs, together with revenue tax if they want to boost up the economy, but for certain industries. We have that option today. I don't think that independence or self-determination will make a difference in that, because we already have those options. If we want to introduce legislation, we have an active legislature that could do that. We also have the option, again, to do tax incentives, similar to the QC program, to incentivize businesses to invest more in Guam. So I think we have the business models, even with the U.S. government being our base. We certainly have, we're not limited in what we can do. We're limited, but we're not extremely limited, whereas we can still offer additional programs or incentives to improve our current programs. But and the same thing with our cultural heritage. We could do more. We can certainly do more to promote our culture and our heritage, and becoming under self-determination or getting decolonized shouldn't give us, again, another kind of platform to work from, to say we're more tomorrow than we were today if we had status quo of where we're at today, because we all have that opportunity to bring it into our businesses, into our lives, our families, where we can live and practice our cultural heritage. Again, the populations are different, so I think that's a huge factor we have to think of, and again, the generational gap. But with regards to private sector, I think there are a lot of, as both what Joe and Juan have said, it's going to be a very long process, and I just don't think we've had these conversations enough to talk about the real impact. The biggest one to me, again, is this tax structure, and also our ability to work within the U.S., the confines of whatever the U.S. governments that we have, whether it's programming, funding, calling ourselves the U.S. destination, which is a huge flag that we carry with regards to not just military and Department of Defense projects, but especially tourism. Although we are geographically closer to the key markets we are available to, like Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and Philippines, it really is, we get a lot of our tourists the last 50 plus years because we have been a US destination and we're much closer, and safety and security is a huge, huge reason why they come to Guam, because we are safe and secure because of the US government. And so that's a huge reason for travel to Guam, other than us being a beach and leisure destination. We're also proximity-wise closer than Hawaii, and we're a lower, cheaper alternative than Hawaii. So I think that all of those things will come into play. Also being our different kinds of taxes, again, with regards to not having a sales tax. All of those reasons are the reasons why our tourists come to our island. And we've benefited greatly from having the tourism industry being as successful it has been over the last 50 plus years. And so if that changes in the next 10 to 20 years, I highly doubt that will be the one thing that hurts us, because we have so many other challenges in tourism, such as competing with Southeast Asia, and everybody is traveling more domestically than they are internationally. And if they are traveling internationally, it's far cheaper to travel elsewhere than Guam. Guam is actually a lot more expensive as a tourist destination now these days than it was in the 80s and 90s. And so I think that that's what I meant by pros and cons, because if we didn't have that US status, then there are probably less fees and fare surcharges that we would have to pay as a US destination. So there are a lot of benefits, but also consequences again. If you were to outweigh that, labor costs, I know Juan talked about, I highly doubt we would ever go down to $3 an hour, but that is what they pay in Southeast Asia. And so we're not there. We are protected by the US with regards to that in increasing the quality of lives by paying a higher wage here on Guam, which is going up next year, or this coming year, and again the following year. So all of those things would come into play because we have to remember where the money comes from. And the money comes from not just taxes from our people, but from private sector that pays those taxes into the government. And so everything will change. Everything is up to question whether or not you can be sustainable with regards to how much our government will receive in taxes and in funding. Sure, we'll have other options, similar to how Palau and the other countries nearby us have options with foreign countries like Japan and China. But if you look at places like Taiwan that is constantly challenged on their political status with China, I think that we would have the same challenges if we chose Japan, Korea, or even China as our allies instead of the US. So everything you have to outweigh. And so I think all of them, they're all very, very challenging questions. And so I think that they're very difficult to answer.
I think our people are resilient, just like our businesses, they are resilient. So whatever political status we choose, I think the businesses will make adjustment to those. Just like Philip mentioned earlier, people that have already made their self-determination have already moved off. And so we'll see what happens when we decide what our political status will be, and I'm sure business will adjust to that. I don't think everybody's going to close up shop and leave for whatever we decide. I think there's still opportunities for Guam, and opportunities still exist. And like I mentioned, we are resilient, and likewise our business will be that as well. And so we'll see what happens when we finally come to that vote.
So I'll mention something. It's when we look at independence, sort of this vision that has been created is Ethiopia. Yeah. Sorry. It's I don't see Guam, if they decide to go towards independence, I see it very unlikely that they would choose not to be free associated with the United States. Because I think when you talk to people, there's some things that they take for granted. The currency. They assume the US dollar will be our currency. Well, the United States doesn't allow anybody to use the US dollar as a currency unless they have a free association agreement with them. And the Dominican Republic, for example, pegged their currency to the US dollar because the United States, when they left, said we can't keep using our currency. But when you talk about where Guam's going, that's sort of one of the first assumptions. It's like, that's never going to change. That's where we are, and that's where we're going. We need to realize that if that direction we're going, we really should think about those issues ahead of time. You look at DFS, T Galleria right now, the main issue the tourists come here to buy at those stores is because there are US laws that prevent forgeries, right? There's an Apple store in every one of their home countries. There's a Gucci store, there's a Tiffany store in their places. They come here and they buy it here because they believe that the one that's here is the real deal. They're not sure about it in their home countries. And when you end up that relationship, those benefits go with it, right? And that certainty goes out with it. So am I going to continue to buy it here, or might as well find another location? So it's all things that we need to look at and think about. It is a complicated matter. We need to get people that are a lot smarter than me together in a room and get them like bankers and accountants and really see where the numbers crunch and what are the more important things that we need to make sure we safeguard.
I don't know. I think we're starting to spin our wheels. We're saying the same thing for us over the last hour. I mean, I don't hear any. Is anybody in the audience for independence? Well, I'd sure like to talk to you later to see why. Because I'm completely against independence. I don't even mind our current status. I'm proud to be an American. You think we're talking about businesses. I'm on the Guam Board of Medical Examiners with Nina's partner, Dr. Badayo. You know how hard it is to get doctors to come out here? Can you imagine if we were an independent country, how much harder it would be then to get doctors to come out here? I mentioned my daughter. She's a specialist. She can't come out here because they can't support we can't support what her specialist does. And I think in our medical community, I hope you're asking these questions to the medical community too, because I think it would decimate the number of docs you have coming out here now.
Phil, thank you.
So you're asking me, I think you're asking us what our opinions are so we can all go from there. I'd really like to see us all go from there and start doing something.
Thank you. That kind of closes our 4 set of questions we had prepared for you guys. We will now give the opportunity for the audience to ask you questions and for you guys to answer.
Don't be shy.
So the questions should be coming from the back that are filtered and prepared.
So I have a question that was sent from the crowd. It seems that many businesses believe that their interests are best served under a statement model. Why do you think so many businesses have taken this stance? And what type of information or action is needed in order to create a more inclusive perspective for the other status options?
I'm assuming that was written before we started our session. I think we've been stating that all along, but if somebody wants us to restate it, we can, but I think we already talked about that.
Okay. Do you have any other questions from
I'm not altogether sure that everyone in the business community prefers the sacred model. I don't know that. I've spoken with many businessmen who would love to see the independence model in place or the free association model in place. And many, many, many businessmen who said, why can't we just keep it the way it is? So.
Yeah, their speaker, Mark Forbes, is not active nearly as active as he used to be, but he would always talk to me about we should be freely associated. And we get into long discussions about it. He's a very, very, very intelligent man, and that's what he thought. As opposed to Howard Hemsley, who always come in my office to talk about being independent and asking me for wants marijuana. I'm just getting to one point, and one guy is Howard, and the other guy is a former speaker, and they both have an idea that Guam should be much different than it is now. I personally, I just don't shut up.
agree that I don't think there's unanimity on the private sector of one status over the other.
Okay, I see questions being written down at the audience's tables. Our guys will be collecting it so that they can pose questions to the panelists.
So if you have a question already prepared, please raise your hands and then one of the candidates for the graduation. I'll still pick up.
As we wait for the questions, I want to say that I'm excited to see all those young people getting involved and trying to get to at least understand better this issue. I wish there would be more people in the room. But it takes, the fact that if we don't get our youth to get excited and interested in this issue, then it becomes hard to actually do any catalyst or any change into where we go into the future. So I encourage, even if you all differ from my personal point of view on different issues, to really continue to get excited and involved in the issue. It is the future of the island, and if you don't get engaged, then a smaller group of people will be the ones that make up the decision of where you're going to be or what's going to happen to the island of Guam.
Good morning, panelists. There's a question that came from the crowd, and it seems that many businesses believe that their interests are best served under a statehood model. Why do you think so many businesses have taken this stance, and what type of information or action is needed in order to create a more inclusive perspective for the other status options?
Sorry, Chris, that question was already asked. Do you have another one?
Yes. How could changing our political status create a closer and more economically prosperous future for Guam?
That's the same question.
Those questions were already asked. I had one. It's what could negotiate rent for the use of our property for military bases? Sure. What can negotiate rent for the use of our property for military bases?
Is that done anywhere in America?
No, it is.
It is? How's it done?
Well,
I mean, they already have it.
they already have it. It's sort of interesting. It's called a bill in the U.S. mainland, and it's around 5%, and they pay that to the state. So in lieu of taxes, they don't pay state taxes. On their state, there's also they have an additional benefits to tobacco and for tobacco and alcohol. They sort of look at what the cost of tobacco and alcohol is in the civilian side of the island or the state, and then they're limited to the amount that they can lower that price inside the base facility. So it's sort of fun to look at that, but it doesn't apply to the territories, which I know that some of our wholesalers would like it to.
Is it applying like in Hawaii, like Kiko?
Sorry?
Does it apply in Hawaii?
Yes, and actually they have to do a study every year. So every year they come in, and normally the Air Force and the Navy like to fight with each other, so they'll find like the cheapest place. The other one tries to outdo them and find someplace that sells it even cheaper.
There is no end to wonder in this world. The payment in lieu of taxes was something we discussed previously, decades ago, about the lease of land in Guam. I think that may be something that would be a reasonable thing to do under statehood. Under free association, I think there may be a complicating factor in you have to lease our land from us, and from the other perspective, okay, how much are you going to pay us to defend you?
So let's look at those two issues, right? So first of all, Guam gets Section 30 funds, so that's part of the formula they came up in sort of the quote-unquote rent for being here in Guam, right? Anybody that spends more than 6 months in the military in the island of Guam, they pay federal taxes to the United States government, and then the United States government reverts those taxes back to Guam. As the military population on island grows, that number grows. The downside was for a while, the U.S. military got into a disagreement with the local population and local government, and then they started doing rotations of less than 6 months of military personnel, so that personnel paid at their home state. Congresswoman Bordaya was really good advocate in eliminating and fixing that issue. So when you look at foreign countries, then you start look what do they actually pay or not pay. So we have a good example close by. It's an island called Kwajalein, where the U.S. military has a huge base, which is extremely important for them. They're willing to pay money for it. But when you look at what they're paying in rent and what they pay in other parts of the world in rent compared to what they provide in benefits to Guam, we're getting multiples of, I'll put it in perspective. So the other days they were saying, oh, $1 billion for the next compact of free associations when other countries wanted to ask. $1 billion in 15 years is how many million dollars a year? And on construction alone this year, they're spending $325 million in Guam. In the hospital alone, it's over $100 million in matching Medicare funding for the island. When we look at our funding level, it would be what we would get in those bases would not be able to deal with the losses that we do from not having been part of the United States and getting into those other social programs, social benefits. Even the highway bill, there won't be a highway bill. It will be your own funding.
I was going to say, in addition to those programs that's already funded, there are other things that I know. I was part of the IRP group at the Guam Power Authority, but I do know that every time that there are infrastructure upgrades, a lot of those upgrades have been afforded to us by the military, like a lot of our concrete poles and things like that. We didn't, as taxpayers, didn't pay all of those outright. A lot of those, whenever they do upgrades to the systems or to the power plants or to the poles or things like that with our utilities, the military is often charged a larger portion of that because they need access to the utilities and they want those systems to be upgraded as well. So similar to tourism, where we subsidize a lot of the residential market, we end up paying 2 times, sometimes more than the residents with regards to power and water and things like that. So a lot of stuff with regards to our utilities, they are charging back to those large purchasers more so than the local residents to help offset those costs because we are the larger purchasers of those utilities. And so it's just really economies of scale. So if you didn't have those businesses or military